Hey folks, we're back. CCERP podcast, Cypress Creek Ecological Restoration Project. Michael here again. So today, because it's a very important topic, not usually covered in our culture or in tracking, foraging, picking up trash, getting outdoors. Today again, we're going to talk about moving in the outdoors. You know, it's an important part of being true to our nature, and that allows us to be true to nature, as like the MovNat motto is, be strong to be helpful. So if we're going to be outdoors with our children, enjoy it, make the most of it, be able to help someone if they're injured, be able to get to all kinds of different places to pick up trash and haul it out a half a mile so we can clean up our woods. If we're going to look at tracks and follow tracks through all kinds of different terrain and through all kinds of different fauna or flora, not fauna, all kinds of different flora. Exercise, move well, be able to help people in floods, which we have around here, then we need to be able to move well. So we're going to talk about that. We've talked about it once with thematics in the podcast. We're going to talk about it again today, again in the future. But today, from the great down under, we have Jack. How do you say your last name? Mullaly? Mullaly. Almost got it. Bam, so close.
All good. It is a tricky one, so that's okay. But yeah, thank you for having me along, Michael. It's a pleasure.
Hell yeah! It's like nice to show the timelessness of this. You're in a different time zone. You're in a different country. Still, we move the same. It'd be nice. I wish I talked some like African language so I could have a African bushman on, or find one that talked English. That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. At the heart of this is we're all people. So the different places, different times, different cultures. When it comes to movement, at the heart of it, there's a lot of similarity here in how we can and how we should move, for sure.
Yeah. And can you tell folks about yourself and your background and your story?
Yeah. So a little bit of context as you know why I'm dropping in on your podcast today. So these days I'm an owner of a gym which is called Ideanthro Movement, where we teach like real, practical, useful, natural movements. This isn't the sort of the gym where you come in and grab some weights and do curls and
look at yourself in the mirror.
Yeah, even barbell squats. Certainly no looking at yourself in the mirror. Most of the time. We do have a little mirror. I can come back to that. But anyway, so this is a gym that's based around real practical movements, teaching movements that we'll use in our day-to-day lives in the real world, because that's ultimately what we need to be fit for. My background, though, is if we go back into my teenage years and then into my 20s, I competed in a sport called biketrials, which is a niche sport, certainly in North America and Australia. It's more popular in Europe, where you ride a bike over obstacles like rocks, logs, concrete pipes.
Cool.
So this is ride a push bike over the toughest obstacles you can. So that's probably where my love of movement, although in a very narrow sense, came from. I'm also by training and by 10 years experience, I'm an environmental engineer with an interest in waterway health. And
cool.
I try and bring these topics together for different sorts of interests. So, you know, your listeners are going to see me draw analogies from different aspects of life, even though we're talking mainly about the movement side of things here.
Ecology is ecology. It's all connected.
Yep.
Yeah, sweet.
Yep, absolutely.
So, what's some of your fitness training background, and like, what's your certification background in that area, and how much have you worked with people and stuff like that?
Yeah, so the program that we most closely align with and draw inspiration from in like here at Ideanthro Movement is MovNat, which I know you mentioned before. So this is this great little program that emphasizes moving the way we are naturally meant to, the way we are biologically and ecologically primed to. So I'm a MovNat level 2 trainer. So that's the heart of what I teach, and I draw inspiration from some other areas. In my past, I've spent some time around the CrossFit world for for better or for worse. There's certainly some stuff I'm not comfortable with there, but there's some good stuff as a gym owner to take away from that world. Mm-hmm. So I spent, I think it's around 4 years coaching in that space for a low-key and like quite professionally run gym here in Brisbane. I've also got a Cert 4 fitness here in Australia, so a grounding, but MovNat is the heart of what I like to teach people and what I find is most useful for people.
Cool. Yeah, and like we talked to Tim a little bit about MovNat and what it is, but how would you describe it?
So I would say it's moving the way. Well, so it depends if we talk about like MovNat as the system and the program. So there's MovNat as like the company and the entity that runs certifications and trainings, and gyms can become affiliates of and the like. And then there's MovNat, the heart of just the movement itself, which is where I draw, like that's where my biggest connection to it is. So in that sense, so I can speak to MovNat in that sense, which is it's moving in the ways that we have evolved to move. So it's lifting, carrying, balancing, throwing, running, jumping, climbing, all these different skills in great variety in the way that our ancestors would have when living in a more natural environment. So the cities that we live in, from a movement point of view, quite a sterile environment. You can think about, say if you decide to walk to the shops, very few of us might even choose to do that. But let's say you walk to the shops it's the reality though, in the modern world, then you're probably going to walk on pavement that's pretty much smooth, pretty flat, not much diversity in how you're stepping. Yeah, sure, you might step on and off the gutter to cross the road sort of thing, but pretty flat, pretty sterile terrain. Your ancestors in the real world would have moved through far more interesting, far more diverse terrain, stepping over twigs, logs, rocks, stepping around things, stepping sideways. There's a lot more variety in natural movement, and I believe that MovNat tries to get into the heart of teaching it. So the skills that that you would learn through MovNat, whether it's lifting, carrying, throwing, whatever, are skills that we still apply in our day-to-day lives. I use picking up my daughter off the ground as an analogy all the time in our classes. It's like, okay, we're learning to lift. You go to a conventional gym, you'll learn to lift with a barbell for the sake of just getting stronger. I'm interested in, can I whip my daughter up off the ground when she's about to, run off the edge of a ledge or something and hurt herself?
Yeah.
And I'm interested in that. So it's all lifting, but then this sort of lifting that I teach and that I think MovNat promotes is this far more varied, far more practical. It's the sorts of things you would do in the real world. Our ancestors did tons of it and in great variety, and we still do bits of it. But if we do more of it, we'll be lots more helpful and lots more useful, like you were alluding to in your introduction.
Yeah, so we're still doing natural human movement, of course, because we're human, but you're saying that the cities and everything we've built and that people most people spend most of their time in is very sterile, and the variety and complexity of the movement is very delimited, and that has an effect on us. And then because of some bad practices, not our fault, the way we're brought up, the way education is, totally beyond our control from when we're like 2 months old, we're put in this context where we don't learn how to move properly as a human with good biomechanics. And so sterile, very limited in variety, limited in complexity. We don't move right through no fault of our own. And those are some of the problems, and we need to get more variety, more complexity, and learn undo the problems we have and learn how to do things biomechanically correct and efficiently, right?
Yeah, and that speaks to my heart. So I mentioned in the introduction, I competed in this sport for biketrials for many years. Great time, learned heaps from it. I competed internationally. But ultimately, like most people who specialize in a particular movement discipline or sport, I got injured. And it's repetitive overuse. In this particular sport, you have a dominant side, you end up twisted out of shape. I developed a bunch of back issues from that. Natural movement for me has been the most effective way to undo 15 years worth of
cool
beating myself up in that sport.
Sweet.
And come back into a far more functional, healthy, pain-free state. And that's where it speaks to at the heart of it. I mean, I keep saying at the heart of it, but that's a really important part of it for me, is that this practice that, sometimes if you look at the early MovNat videos and like the videos of Owan running around in the bush with no shirt on and stuff, you'd think that this is for like 20-year-old men who think that they're Tarzan. And the reality is it's not.
Yeah.
It's for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing is, right? So I've got my gym. I've got Ideanthro Movement. The vast majority of my members are women in their 50s and 60s.
Oh, cool.
Who absolutely love the fact that this is a space that they're given, like a safe space to learn a bunch of the skills that maybe they haven't learned or refined in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe, so this is getting very truthful about this, is maybe things that like they were expected to be able to do in school, but never really got the teaching to do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then, shied away from movement. More than a few of my members tell me stories about hiding in the back of gym class. So being in gym class, being expected to, vault over a box or something in class, having been given no instruction, being totally terrified of, of failing in front of their peers, and therefore having pushed away and shied away from movement for their whole lives, and then coming into this space, into a program that gives a safe space and a way to actually learn these things in the way, they should have been taught at school, and then finding, wait, hang on, I can actually do all this stuff that I never thought I could do before.
Sweet.
And it's really liberating and really empowering. And then for me as a coach, it's just
beautiful.
Yeah, if you're doing that to people, it feels amazing. So
yeah. So then you just give them a space where they feel better, and so they're able to vault over the box. Is that it, or what?
Yeah, well, it's still very much coaching. So in this particular example, I very much believe in giving people the little steps that they can take. So each step in is safe. So using this school analogy, the problem is that, these ladies were asked to vault over a box, but not given the steps to build up to it to know how to do it. So it's too big of a jump. The risk of failing in front of your peers is too much. Push back, say no. So I give very basic, small little steps to build into this. So it's not just like, here's the box, get over it, but it's like, okay, here is this really low object on the ground. We're going to start building up the basic pattern there. You're going to get comfortable there. I'm going to slowly move it higher. Okay, once we're up to a certain height, maybe we're going to make it narrower, but it's very progressive and very safe. So I'm never taking people past the point where they're going to push back and just be like, nah, not on. And I think that is a bit of a problem sometimes with MovNat does a very good job these days of showing how it is for everyone. But sometimes, you probably follow a bunch of the MovNat trainers on Instagram and stuff, and trainers in any fitness space. And as I say, you see a bunch of like guys in their 20s and 30s, shirts off. It sometimes looks intimidating, but it's not. It shouldn't be. Yeah. It is for everyone.
Yeah, so that's good. It's like, I don't know of a lot of other systems that have that step-by-step development you're talking about. There's some, of course, with like, the only thing I can think of would be maybe with the amount of weight you do, where you build up, but I don't think anybody really has much step-by-step development except MovNat. Of course, there are other people that have to do some, like Coach Summer, a gymnastics coach, coaches Olympic athletes, and of course other people have to know about it. But I don't know. Like, do you know of any other general system? Like
no.
that?
So I think there's lots of step-by-step progression out in the sporting world.
Yeah.
So gymnastics is a great example of that.
And martial arts. Yeah.
Yeah. So in all of these specialized disciplines, it's pretty well understood that when you teach skills, you're learning basics and then layering more complexity on. It's the same in the parkour world. It's the same in rock climbing. Good route setters in rock climbing gyms, gradually add more and more complexity of skill as they get harder. But I don't see much in the fitness and the general preparedness world that's doing that. But I would suggest that the reason why is that most of the fitness world isn't building skill. So most of the fitness world is based on, if you get stronger, there's this assumption, if you get stronger, if you get cardiovascularly better, you're somehow going to turn into an absolute beast and be physically capable, and it misses the skill component to movement. Whereas what I think MovNat does really nicely, and what I try and do in here, is really try and bring the skill element to the fore. And as you're learning all these new skills in a nice, at the pace that's right for you, you happen to get stronger as you go. The strength and the cardiovascular ability is the side effect of becoming more skillful, and not the other way around. And I think that's why you don't see a stepwise approach in the fitness industry, is because for the most part, it's not teaching a lot of skill. Things like CrossFit teach bits of skill, but not in the same breadth and capacity that MovNat does.
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense, because I think a lot of people will be familiar or can identify in their past with some situations where, people say, I can do it, I'm tough. Well, being tough doesn't help you do a lot of things. You try walk, like doing a hand-foot crawl or bear crawl on a 2-inch diameter bar because you're tough. It's not going to happen. Or walking on a log across a creek because you're tough. It's not going to happen. It takes balance.
Yep. I'll give you the best example that I know of this, and this is kind of close to my heart. So I really enjoy bouldering. So that's technical rock climbing low to the ground, for people who aren't familiar with that. So it's trying to climb the hardest routes that you can, but you're not miles off the ground. There's no safety rope. There's been a real growth in indoor bouldering gyms in Australia in the past 5 years, let's say. And if you go into a bouldering gym as a new person wanting to just get into it to learn, and you want to know who to watch, the people that you should watch and try and learn from are the women who have some experience. Doesn't have to be like the top woman in the gym by any means. But if you just want to randomly pick someone and have a pretty good chance that they're the person to watch, you should pick a woman who's climbing pretty, some of the tougher climbs in the gym. For the simple reason that, because on average, women aren't as strong as men. Now, women can be very, very, very strong. Women can be stronger than many, many men on the street. That's not the point that I'm making it. But because if you take a random selection of men and women and stick them in a climbing gym, the men are more likely to be stronger, right? That the women who get to a high level in rock climbing then are far more likely to have learned really good technique and really good skill. And they will, of course, have developed heaps and heaps of strength at the time, and will probably be far stronger than I am at climbing, and far stronger than you as a new person walking in is, right?
Yeah.
But because there's been that extra emphasis placed on that of needing to learn the skill, they are way more skillful on the wall than most men are. The men that get to the top level are also very equally skillful, but if you pick a random selection of people in a gym, you're far more likely to get really skillful women in a rock climbing gym than you are guys. You see a lot of guys in rock climbing gyms who are just trying to brute strength through stuff, and it serves them well for a little while, and then they just hit a plateau, and it's a real reality check. So I always say I take friends into climbing gyms, and I'm like, watch the women climb, and you'll learn best from them.
Yeah. So, and then the guys would have to have, and the problem there is, since some of them have not all, but since some have bad ideas, they got the philosophical issues. They really got to break through that philosophical barrier to see the importance of technique and layering their strength on it. So that really cause them to get discouraged, get stuck in where they are and to plateau and not be able to get out of it effectively.
Yeah, it tells you a lot about character, because eventually you hit the point. Again, this is all there's a bunch of there's a bunch of stereotypes in this, but I hope people take the point of what I'm getting at. You know, the strong guy walks into the gym and he'll make progress for a while there, but at some point, there's only so far that initial strength will take them. And then, at some point, there's this gut check moment where they have to reassess and accept the fact that their current raw abilities are only getting so far, and that you almost need to take a step back and relearn stuff and slow down. It's an interesting one, and I think that parallels into the. I used to see that a lot in CrossFit. A lot of the time, people coming in, really strong, really fit, can rip stuff around for a certain time, but it ultimately comes to limit progress. A slower and steadier and more skill-based approach delivers far longer-term growth and ultimately leads to far more abilities in the long term.
Yeah, like Bruce Lee was 120, 140 pounds, 5'6". That's all you need.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
And I think even from what I've heard or read, I think he even did some bodybuilding because he thought that'd help him. And he might have got up to 180 or 200 or something, but he found it was making him too slow. So he cut back.
Yep. I mean, this is a funny thing. So to throw another analogy at this is the same principle that we're talking about here is what, when the UFC was first started, it was the same principle of like the Gracie family and jiu-jitsu. Not that I know a lot about martial arts by any stretch of the imagination, but their premise was that a skillful small person should be able to beat an unskilled beast of a person, because skill should be able to make up for size and the like. And obviously, once you get to, in those sorts of things, once you get to the highest level and everyone's really skillful, sure, size and strength come into it and make a difference. There's a reason why fighting and weightlifting have weight classes. But the point is that skill can take you a very, 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 very long way, even without the pure top-end athletic gifts of strength and speed and like.
Yeah, and I think also a lot of like U.S. Navy SEALs are 5'8", 6 foot tall. Some are 5'6". Some people might think, well, they're Navy SEALs, so they're going to be 6'2", 6'4", 250 pounds. But no, doesn't work that way.
No, well, the reality is in most pursuits in the world, being an outlier is, in most physical pursuits, being too much of an outlier becomes a limitation. Like it's all well and good that Kevin Durant's got the best part of a 7-foot wingspan or whatever, and therefore is an incredible basketball player. But that in many other aspects of life, that probably doesn't serve him that well. It makes, it means that he's found a niche that works incredibly well for him, and that's absolutely awesome. But when it comes to being, it's like, to life and being fit for life, and fit for lots of tasks, being in the center and being in the more average proportion of things is often very much the spot that we actually want to be if we're talking rounded fitness.
Yeah.
Sports often reward outliers, but real world fitness doesn't necessarily.
Yeah. Unlike some, of course, some Navy SEALs might be like 6'2", 6'4" and are and like 200, 250 or whatever, but the point is that most of them aren't. And like Bruce Lee, you also have some famous Texas Rangers, the law officers, not the baseball team, but that have been like some of the best ones have been like 5'6".
Yep. Yeah.
But so anything else you want to add about MovNat, what it is, the importance of it?
Look, I feel we've done pretty well setting a context and a foundation. Maybe just to give people a little bit. I'll say one more thing to give some context, to give an example here. So they get a sense of how this maybe applies in a gym setting before we go and talk about it in the outside, in the real world. So for me, like a typical class might run for an hour. And so each week we have a theme that we work on of a skill. So it might be balance for a week, by way of example. And so a session is like we run through some warm-up stuff, some rehab, some prehab stuff that does look a little bit more like we're doing exercises rather than movement. But the reality is people come in with niggles and stuff, and we need to help them work through that. Mm-hmm. And then we will have the skill that we're working on, and we will practice that as a group. So it might be balance, and there's a whole bunch of different ways that we work on that, but we practice that skill, balancing at different heights, balancing on different objects. Maybe you've got a partner trying to unbalance you, whatever the case might be. And this is where this blends with the fitness world, is we either then have a workout or we play a game. But it's an element where we're trying to get our heart rates up, but it's always using the skill. So this morning I took a lady through a class that had some balance. She was new to it, so we're balancing on a beam, quite a wide beam on the ground. I'm passing some stuff back and forth with her to kind of subtly unbalance her. And then we come to do a workout that's interval style stuff that's got some running in it. So we're running for like 30 seconds, hard and fast, and then we're stopping and we're having to balance and carry some stuff across balance beams and the like. So we're building in these real world movements into something that looks a little bit more like fitness itself. Mm-hmm. But just to give people context of that, what they might actually look like in the gym. So,
and then the step-by-step development thing, that applies to people wherever they are. So it's not like they're going to come in and you're going to have them vault over a box or something, or even necessarily develop it. But you're always going to start with people the way they are, because that's the given. They were in our culture. You got to start doing rehab and prehab and developing from wherever they are to getting them to go as far as they can. Yeah,
well, it's like this morning, the lady that was in this morning, it was her first session with me, so I didn't know a lot about how she was going to move beforehand. So we come to do balance. First thing I'm doing is I pick my widest beam. It's right on the floor, so there's very, very, very little risk. It's also the easiest beam that I've got for her to walk along. And it starts with, okay, just give it your best attempt. Just show me where you're at. She walks along it, give her a few goes, okay. And then we just start slowly layering a bit more complexity on it. So I've got a few broomstick handles. This one I'm pretty certain straight out of the MovNat level 1, I think. But we start passing the broomstick back and forth between us because that adds a little bit of complexity. She can't just think about walking on the balance beam. She's got to think about grabbing it. Add a bit more complexity. We start gently throwing it back between us and we build up. But if that was some other person who came in and if they immediately walk straight along the beam, absolutely no dramas, maybe I'm not going to pass back and forth to start with. Maybe we're going to go straight to throwing it. Maybe we're going to throw two objects. You just, in the same way that you progress people through different weights in weight training, depending on their abilities, it's the same thing with skill. You progress people in different ways with different skills, depending on where they're at. I've got some friends who come down every now and again who have been on the TV show, Australian Ninja Warrior.
Oh, cool.
There's American Ninja Warrior. Obviously, when they come down, I'm throwing really different stuff at them, right? Because they spend their lives monkeying around and running along different beams. I'm throwing really different stuff at them to suit their abilities. Cool. It's scalable.
Cool. So that's MovNat, natural movement, how it applies to everybody in all situations. And for folks, so Jack's down there in Australia right now, and it's going on 4 p.m. my time, so going on 8 a.m. your time.
That's true. Yep.
And today is Tuesday. It's Wednesday for you.
It's Wednesday for me. Yep.
Yeah. So y'all are ahead of us.
Yeah.
We're catching up. But you live in the city, or you got access to nature areas down there, or what?
Yeah, so I live in the city, so I was raised in the city, in the suburbs. So like by car. So to give people some context, Brisbane is a city of about 1 million people. If you include like the Gold Coast and the Sunshine Coast to the north and south, it's an area of a couple of million people in total. I live about 20 to 30 minutes drive outside the centre of Brisbane, so it's well and truly in the suburbs, right? And I grew up in this area, so I'm not living out in the bush by any means, but we are fortunate in that Brisbane has some decent pockets of bushland and natural areas scattered throughout the city.
Cool.
So to give an example, there's a spot called Toohey Forest, which is about 10 minutes drive from my house, which is somewhere where I've spent a lot of time.
Nice, good.
So so that gives some context, I suppose, of my relationship to nature. I'm very much a city person who has opportunities to get out in nature.
How big is the forest that you have access to over there? Do you know?
So that particular one is probably 2 kilometers by. It's probably a bit bigger than that. But let's say it's about 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers.
Cool.
So
nice.
You can easily walk from one side to the other of it. It's a pocket of bushland.
Cool.
But then I could drive half an hour and get access to much bigger areas of bushland.
Cool. Nice. And then, so you're close to Brisbane, you say?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. And then I'll have to look that up on a map. You say, where is that in Australia?
So if you had the east coast of Australia, then say if you started at the bottom of the east coast and you came maybe a third of the way up, you'd get to Sydney. And if you came not quite another third of the way up, you'd get to Brisbane.
Okay. So on the east coast. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so things like the Great Barrier Reef are north of us. Sydney's about 10 hours drive south of us. On the east coast.
Cool. How far from the coast are you? Right on it? Or?
I could be at a surf beach in an hour. I could be immediately to the east of Brisbane is Moreton Bay, which is a Ramsar listed, so a really high quality like bay and wetland area. So I can get to water quicker. I can probably get to the bay in like 40 minutes from home. But to get to like the surf or anything like that, it's probably an hour going south is what I need to do.
So it sounds kind of pretty much roughly like Houston.
Okay.
Depending on where you live, but yeah, we're roughly an hour or so from the coast, I think. And I haven't been to Galveston for a while, but I think that's what it takes. And to the Gulf Coast. Then I'm like you, I'm about, depending on where I go, 5 to 15 minutes from a local creek, different parks along it, run up and down it and stuff. But cool.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like I can go to, I can walk 5 minutes from my house and get to a very urbanized creek that has some natural aesthetic to it. Like, don't get me wrong, but it's not being out in nature. You're still very much in the suburbs. So that's,
Cool. So let's get into how to move out in nature, and because you got, as opposed to these flat, sterile surfaces and these typical movements that people repeat time and time again, what's some advice you have for people when being outdoors and moving through that complex, varied, fractile, natural environment?
So I think, this will sound a little bit maybe cliched or something. So I'll approach this from a few different angles, I suppose. One angle is just get out there and do something. Like, don't choose that it's going to be, I need to go out into nature, so I need to go for a 10-mile bushwalk or a 10-mile hike, and it's not that. Like, I would say,
or a walkabout. How far is an actual walkabout in Australia?
You might need to define the term walkabout for me.
Maybe it's just something in American literature.
I've heard the term, but I don't really know precisely what it means.
Yeah, from my understanding is it's a long voyage through the outback of Australia, alone, maybe alone. I think it's alone for, I don't know, it sounds like hundreds or thousands of miles. It's kind of like a journey some native or ancient people might have be required to make when they were young. I'll have to look it up.
I'm not going to speculate. Like, I think I know what you're getting at, but I'm not going to speculate. The odds of me being wrong are pretty high.
Funny. Good.
Yeah, but anyway. I suppose coming back to this, so my advice in terms of getting out and moving in nature. So I really like. This comes back to one of my philosophies on movement. I think that in the modern world, one of the things that we suffer from is a lack of variety in our movement. Now, clearly, if you've got an office job and you're sitting all day, there's a lack of quantity of movement. We're not moving that much. You're sitting in an office desk. I understand it. I worked for many years as an engineer, sat in front of a computer for a long time. So clearly, there's a lack of quantity. But I think even beyond that, for the movement that we do, there's a lack of variety in it. And it's really subtle variety. Again, it comes back to, I mentioned this earlier, where if you go for a walk to the shops in the city, it's a sterile, every step is fundamentally the same. You go out and walk in nature, every step is fundamentally different because you have to step over that root, around that tree, down off that rock, whatever it might be. So my feeling is that the initial benefits of going out and moving in nature from a movement point of view, I'm not suggesting that people go out and do huge quantities of movement. I would say just find a way to go out and do a little bit of movement in nature, because the variety will make a really big difference to you. So that's my first bit of advice there. If someone was coming with me to Tui Forest, let's say, like I just, we'd walk up path for a few hundred meters and then just walk to one of the lookouts that suddenly gets us off path and just go for a little bit of a walk around the rocks and stuff up there. And that's how I'd say introduce them to moving in that nature. Because there's no need to beat yourself up with a super long walk, but you get the benefits of that variety of movement. So that's my first thought on that space. Something that I know we're going to need to talk to eventually is this element of either risk or perceived risk in this space. Nature doesn't need to be crazy risky, but again, if you're not used to moving in nature, there's, it's differently risky than walking down the footpath, right? Like most experiences in life, it's about being, if you're used to a particular environment, you get used to the risks associated with it, mm-hmm. and therefore can manage them, can be aware of them, etc. So it's like driving a car. This probably works as a reasonable example. If you took an 18-year-old kid who'd never driven before, let's say, and taught them to drive like perfectly around a racetrack, let's say, and made them really good, so they could drive with no other cars on the racetrack, could drive really, really, really well around that racetrack, and then just throw them out into driving on the road. Clearly there's some flaws and some risks in that, because they're not going to have the awareness of how other vehicles move and probably not understand checking the mirrors to understand who's coming up behind you and all of that sort of.
Good example. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's similar to moving out in nature. But once you spend time doing it and get used to it, then you become aware of all that stuff in exactly the same way that you and I driving down the street are aware of all the inherent risks of driving on the street that our hypothetical race car driver isn't. So there's an element here of, you feel nervous telling people, just go out in nature and enjoy it, because it's like, what if they get injured sort of thing. But on the flip side, it's a case of, but once you start spending time out there, those risks, you come to understand them. You come to understand what a loose rock looks like or whatever. So my advice in that space is, take care, be aware of the fact that it's a new environment for you, but don't let that stop you go out. Just go into it slowly, in the same way that I teach the person balancing in the gym to go into the balance slowly, and I slowly build them up. I'd say if you're taking yourself out in nature, just slowly build yourself up in nature. Don't go straight out and try and swim across a raging torrent. Probably not a great idea, but you get it. I think you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and I think if you have a good MovNat coach, someone can give you some guidance on it, then that person's going to teach you how to fall and how to do things. So that helps further eliminate the risk. So if you are jumping from one rock to maybe a tree limb, you're going to know how to grab onto that tree limb and hold it so you don't fall. Or if you do fall on the ground, you're going to know how to roll. And so that,
yep.
There's all these different ways you can eliminate and control risk and danger that, we wouldn't be aware of on our own. I sure the hell wasn't. Like, before MovNat, I was a horrible mover. It still affects me to this day, I'm sure. It's like, because I'm not, everyone has more to do. And I didn't, I wish I would have gotten to MovNat when I was 10 years old or something, but I didn't. But, my shoulders could be better. All kinds of things could be better, but I'm sure a hell of a lot better off and can do more than I ever could at any age. Doing MovNat, I can do more than I could at any other age,
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so you telling me that just there's reminded me of a very tangible example of something that I would suggest people do if you're starting to move in nature, which is, don't assume that things are sturdy. One of the things about one of the things about the modern world is that most things are pretty sturdy. So like I can go for a run in the park, and if there's a fence around the park and I want to jump up onto it, pretty good chance it's going to be sturdy. Mm-hmm. But in nature, stuff can look sturdy and not be sturdy. So one tangible bit of advice when you start going out in nature is check things. Like give them a wobble. You want to climb over that tree, or that fallen tree, but give it a wobble and check that it's actually not teetering on toppling over some more. Or
true.
This is a tangible one. We actually practice this in the gym at times. Say if you're crossing a creek and there are some stones across the creek and stuff, then I teach people in the gym how to like reach out with your foot and like tap and try and wobble a stone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice.
To check that it's actually stable enough to put your weight on it, rather than just like walking up to it and being like, and bang, straight on, stop it. But you'll see that, I see that all the time when people aren't as used to moving in the natural environment. It's just this kind of assumption that things are going to stay where they are, sort of thing. So that would be a really tangible one, is find ways to test stuff before committing to it.
Yeah, I see that a lot too, near the local creek. Kids and people out walking on the creek bank, and they slip a lot because, as you say, they're used to just stepping mindlessly. Well, you didn't say the mindlessly thing, but that's the way I'm looking at it. Just because they're not trained to be mindless, not because they're stupid. It's just, they're not used to the environment. They haven't learned from the culture and from their elders to be careful about what they're doing and be thoughtful. So they just blindly step on stuff and then they just slip down the creek. But if they'd learn to be more mindful, that wouldn't happen. But it's also, yeah, I agree. But it's also the case that sort of thing then becomes automatic over time. So in the same way so I'll come back to my driving analogy. In the same way that as a learner driver, the first time you get taken out on the road, it feels like everyone's driving so fast and rushing around. Like it's really overwhelming, right? And you have to pay really close, conscious attention. But you and I know that however many years down the track of driving for each of us now, yes, we pay attention,
but lots of it becomes automated.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing happens with moving out in nature. So if so for me, running down, or moving across that creek bed, I am checking that stuff is safe and sturdy, but it doesn't mean that I'm doing it really, really consciously.
Yeah.
It starts to come a lot more naturally.
Yeah.
So the analogy of learning to drive is a great one here, because we can say to people, look, you decide you want to get out in nature and start moving around the bush some more, or the forest or the creek or whatever it is some more. Well, initially it's going to be like learning to drive, where you've got to be really switched on and conscious. But as you start to practice, your brain's going to learn these patterns in the same way it learns to drive, and you're going to be able to switch off more as things become more automated in your mind. And it's going to become less of a conscious effort to do in the short term. So there's going to be this kind of initial barrier where you've got to be really switched on, but then it's going to become much more natural over time.
Yeah. Yeah, true. And so, you were going over a couple pieces of advice. Number one, was it just get outdoors a little bit and take it easy? And then number two was what? Do you recall?
Well, so number one is like just get out there, right? Mm-hmm. But get out there doesn't mean go for a 20K hike. Mm-hmm. Get out there just means look, find a nice small bit of bushland, go for a few minutes, get amongst it, sort of thing. And then the flip side to that was, well, be aware that it's a new environment that you're not used to, so there's going to be some things that your subconscious isn't picking up on. You go for a walk down the street, your subconscious knows that stepping out onto the road without looking is a pretty silly idea. But you're out in a new environment in nature where your subconscious isn't as primed for this, so you're going to need to be more mindfully aware initially. And that means things like checking that stuff is sturdy, as an example. But it will become more automatic over time. A question for you. Was part of what we wanted to talk about here around being barefoot in nature as well? Was that somewhere where you wanted to go here? Or
Yeah. And so you might offer advice about your insight and experience about the importance of it, whether people should do it or not, how to get into it, the value, things like that, if you want to.
Sure.
Or
so I'm interested in it. So
I do barefoot all the time.
And I do too. These days, one of the advantages of owning my own gym is that it's a barefoot environment.
Sweet.
Like we train barefoot.
Nice.
Yeah. So my take on the barefoot thing is this: is one, I get that there are some social situations where like being in shoes makes sense, or or we're required to, or the like, and I totally understand that, and I wear shoes when I needs to. I've learned the social situations where wearing shoes makes sense. But there are some real advantages to being barefoot. For me, it comes back to the body is a system, and I'm sure this will speak to your interest in ecology, is the body is a system where everything relates back to everything else. And there is no debating the fact that wrapping our feet up in shoes all day, every day, leads to the feet becoming deconditioned. They lose mobility, they lose strength, they start to not function the way they should. And because the body is a system, that has other flow-on effects up throughout the body. Mm-hmm. So I like to give examples for people to try and make this real. So this isn't saying this is the only way this plays out, but this is an example. So I mentioned earlier that from my years of competing in the sport of bike trials, I had got kind of twisted out of shape and had a bunch of injuries, and some of that was some back injuries and stuff. But at the end of my bike riding career, I was chronically tight through my hip flexors, pulled my pelvis forward, so I had excessive curves in my lower back and all sorts. And I was doing all sorts of different stuff, slowly unpicking this and the like. But I had this persistent tightness in the front of my right hip that I could not get rid of no matter how I stretched it, no matter how I mobilized it, triggered it, foam rolled it, whatever, would never go away. And then I stumbled across some really, I was aware though that I also had a collapsed arch on that right foot. So I hadn't really put together the connection that they were both feeding back into each other as strongly as they were. I kind of knew it, but not so strongly. And I stumbled across some foot stability drills from a group who work under the name of Fighting Monkey. So this is Joseph. Yeah, Joseph and Linda. I think they're Czech. But anyway, they do a whole bunch of really interesting movement stuff. But they have these little drills where effectively, sounds really funny, but you stand on small bits of wood like Jenga blocks from the game Jenga. Anyway, I started doing some of their foot stability drills, and my arch, this collapsed right arch, started to stand back up.
Cool.
And itself strengthen up, work better. By this point, I was already doing a bit of barefoot work, right? And I'd made some improvements, but it hadn't gone all the way. Anyway, did these drills, this arch started to recover and stand back up, and the tightness in that right hip just went away. It just released and it never came back because it was feeding back in. And the reason I tell that story is to make the point that shoes cause our feet to weaken, tighten, stop doing what they're meant to do, the arches collapse, all sorts of stuff happens. And because the body's a system, that will lead to and reinforce and interrelate with other problems elsewhere in the body. Being barefoot is exactly what the feet want to do. It's what they're made to do. So being barefoot helps the foot to strengthen and work the way it should. That's the long story to get to that point as to why barefoot's important, why I teach barefoot in the gym, etc. So I think it's really important that people try and spend as much time barefoot as possible. Having said that, it's something you want to ease back into. So using a typical gym analogy here, you get someone come into a gym who hasn't exercised in years and years, not particularly strong, got some mobility issues. You don't just ask them to pick up the heaviest barbell in the gym, right? Because they'll injure themselves. You don't just ask them straight out to do 30 minutes of vigorous sprinting on their first session, right? Because it's too much for the body. It's the same thing with the feet, right? And this is where some of the barefoot running or the minimalist running world went astray initially, is that we have to build back into this. The feet, it takes time to recondition the feet to be able to spend time barefoot or to spend time barefoot outside. So in my case, it was about now, I'm not saying I knew the best ways to do this at the time, but in my case, it was about a 4-year journey from being effectively shoes all the time, at least when out in public. Not shoes at home, but shoes whenever I was out and about. About a 4-year journey through to today, where I'm effectively always barefoot, and I've gone so far as to run a half marathon on tarmac barefoot.
Cool.
But to make the point that, it's not we need to ease into these things. If I'd gone out and tried to run that half marathon straight away, I would have broken. And fair enough. So coming into the barefoot space, super important, but it also needs to be eased into over a period of time. I've got a friend who's a podiatrist who he says that, look, without knowing if you don't know anything else about someone's history or their movement or their feet, you should assume that it's going to be at least a year to take someone from being in shoes all the time to the point where they could safely run a couple of kilometers barefoot.
Interesting. Okay. That's good to hear. Thanks.
And that's just a rule of thumb. Obviously, everyone's different, right? But as a rule of thumb, and to give people an indication that it takes time, that's what that friend of mine who's a podiatrist quotes. So, circling into this, so easing into it, getting into these things, running barefoot off-road. So you said you go barefoot a lot. Do you go barefoot in nature?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so what was your experience building up to that or building into it?
Stupidity, ignorance, blindness, foolishness. But the thankfully, I was kind of fortunate, and it worked out okay. I think because I go barefoot indoors, that might have helped. Had a history of some running through life, so maybe that helped with the feet. But yeah, I could tell I definitely had to get used to using them as feet instead of flippers, because with dress shoes and a lot of shoes, they can't function as feet. They're just little flippers because they're in that flipper like thing. It's like wearing flippers when you're swimming. And I noticed that at first, when I would, I don't notice it anymore because my feet are better, stronger, more flexible. But at first, when I'd get out of my truck and park and walk on some concrete to the front door, having my bare foot pressed down on the concrete, it felt so awesome sometimes, like I was getting a massage, because I kind of was,
Yep.
You don't got to pay for someone to massage your feet. Just walk on concrete when you're ready for it. But and then I think I did sprints too early. Because at the time, this is way before I got certified in MovNat, before I really studied it. I was kind of aware of it, but just like the Erwan video of like running, all the stuff he does, the original video. And I didn't know enough about logical progressions or fitness or training. And I think I sprinted too early. And it was on grass, but that might have affected my feet a little bit. I don't remember much pain or anything, but I think sometimes I might have been a little sore, the muscles in my feet. But yeah, I've still maintained barefoot, and I've been to a place in Texas called Enchanted Rock that's just a big piece of nothing but rock. Like, I don't know, it's like walking on, I don't remember what kind of rock it is, like granite or something hard. And I've been up and down that thing twice, barefoot, and, do all kinds of stuff out in my area barefoot. We got rolling, curving trails that have roots on them, and some pieces of concrete here and there for the bike trails. And I've done, short runs, and I've done like an 11-mile run, and I'm fine, and I love it. And I find I really need to be barefoot because of the stuff I do. I need that sensory input to be able to move like an animal properly through the environment by sensing it, have all this automatic stuff happening, walking on soil with different moisture conditions, slippery mud versus like dry sand, and walking on logs. You got to be able to feel how slippery it is immediately, have that immediate feedback to be able to react and move properly on it without falling or getting hurt. So, or climbing in a tree, like a lot of people will know when they were young and you're climbing in a tree and you have shoes on, a lot of people will remember the shoe getting stuck between the trunk and the branch sometimes. I don't have to worry about that. But
I mean, I think you're alluding to the fact that you start to get a bunch more feedback and information from the terrain that you're moving over. It's like me throwing analogies out there again, but it's like if you imagine if you've ever skied, right, and you try and, I don't know, like get your phone out of your ski jacket pocket while you've still got ski gloves on, and it's like fumbling and like, oh, I've got no dexterity in it. Once you've spent some time barefoot, and particularly barefoot out in nature, and then you go and stick shoes back on, it's like wearing ski gloves. You don't realize what you lost in that ability and that sensing and that dexterity until you've been there and and come back out of it. But something else that you alluded to in that discussion that I really like is, whether you are conscious of this or not, is progressions of both, intensity of movement. So you said, perhaps you ran too early, or perhaps you sprinted too early. Well, so if people are wanting to get into this, one way to progress is, you start with spending time walking barefoot. And then you could start with little bits of jogging barefoot. And then you could move towards sprinting is a progression. Or you could progress the duration of time. So I would always, when I talk to people about starting to go barefoot, then obviously in my gym is a spot where they start spending time barefoot. But then it's a case of okay, well, maybe start making sure you're not wearing not wearing shoes around home. Like, you get home and you don't just automatically leave your shoes on. You take them off when you get home. And so you start spending a bit more time at home barefoot. And then you start maybe taking them off while you're sitting at your desk at the office. So many offices won't be stoked if you walk around the office barefoot, but might not have such a problem if you're barefoot while sitting at the desk. So maybe you start to get them out of that in there, and then maybe you experiment with going barefoot while walking around your yard. But so you gradually increase the amount of time you're barefoot. And then the other progression is progressing the surfaces that you start barefoot. And again, you kind of spoke to this, which is starting with an indoor environment that's pretty sterile, pretty safe, at home where you have control over it. So so you know what's going on with that surface. And then maybe you progress to grass in a well-maintained park. So grass is really soft on the feet, but it does have the ability to hide stuff that you might step on that's awkward, like broken glass or whatever. So maybe it's like you start at home and then you go to a park that's well-maintained, well-manicured, you can see what's going on, and you start spending time on that grass barefoot. And then maybe if someone's ready to head into the forest, then you go on trails that are primarily dirt, not gravel, because dirt's going to be softer on the feet to start with as well. And then maybe you start spending time on trails that have lots of bedrock. So again, it's lots of rock, so it's harder, but it's not pointy. And then you start moving towards trails that have got patches of gravel that are going to start to point into you. And so it's just finding different ways to slowly progress into things. And if you sense that things aren't right, you start to get soreness in the foot, you get it checked out or whatever, or you give it a little bit of time to rest up and just progressing in slowly. That would be my advice to someone wanting to do it themselves. Now, of course, one of my members could come into the gym and be like, oh, hey, Jack, I want you to help me doing this. And there's, like any sort of training, you can help someone more specifically as a trainer one-on-one because I can see what their foot's doing. But as broad general advice, taking it slow and progressing through amounts of time, intensity of movement, and the surface is, a slow and steady approach through those things is a general way to start it.
Cool. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's very much my kind of my story of how I got into it, I suppose. One thought that springs to mind that I suppose people should be aware of is the feet will get used to these things. I imagine this has probably been your experience, but let me ask you this. Did you have any experiences when you first started whereby you jumped onto a surface that was like too rough too soon and it was just like, oh my goodness, that's so pointy, that's so whatever, and you weren't ready for it?
Not that I recall, because I think I progressed all right. So I don't think so.
Yeah, okay. That's fair enough. What I would say to people is that, like with anything else, like with anything, weightlifting in a gym or learning balance as a skill, there will be things that right now seem like they're not possible, but with this gradual building into a gradual exposure, your feet will get used to. So I know that there are like I've run say 5Ks on really gravelly, nasty trails, right? I also know that the first time I tried to do that, it was brutal because I just was not ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
But with gradual exposure over time, the feet get used to it, they become accustomed to it. You get better at your foot placements, you get softer with how you step and all this stuff, and it improves. So so for someone who's interested in this, if the first time you do this and you try and walk down the sidewalk and it turns out that it's actually really uncomfortable because your feet aren't used to it, don't let that be the thing that puts you off forever. Just, remember that it needs to be it's going to be a gradual process is what I'm getting at with that. It also gets safer with time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So one of the things, so we do need to talk about safety here, because particularly, let's be honest, I think protected, so don't get me wrong, there's some, if we go to one extreme and look like really protective hiking boots, then in the short term, they're really good at protecting you. If you step on a piece of glass, let's say, it's not going to cut through that shoe and it's not going to cut you. Long term, spending all that time wrapped up in a super protective shoe is doing the foot harm.
And the body.
And the body. And
Upstream.
It will present harm, but it won't present it today or tomorrow or next week or the week after. But it might present it in a year's time or 5 years' time.
Mm-hmm.
It takes some time for those things to cause problems. But so there's no doubt, though, that when it comes to protecting you from getting cut from glass or stepping on thorns and stuff, shoes help. And going barefoot can cause you some problems, right? I've had experience, I have cut myself. I haven't cut myself on glass, but I've had glass stick into the bottom of my foot around the streets and stuff. I've had thorns and things while out in the bush and the like. Two points that I would make to people is, one, you need to be aware of it. You're going to start looking where you step more carefully. That's the reality, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Being more mindful of what to do.
And instead of using their shoes, people learn to use their eyes and their mind to protect themselves. People get careless with shoes. Just like I think there's studies done that showed that when people wear helmets when they're bicycling, there's a higher rate of accidents in some cases, some situations, because the drivers think the bicycler's protected and the bicycler takes risks. So in some situations, maybe some outdoor stuff, you might want to wear a helmet, but for some riding, I've heard that it actually makes, as I say, more dangerous. Same with shoes. People get careless. They'll step wherever, but I'm very alert and mindful. I'm not omniscient. I can't do everything. I'm not perfect. I'm not impervious to the environment, but I'm very aware. I've learned to be very visually aware and mindful of where I'm stepping and what I'm stepping on, and that is probably a much more effective deterrent than wearing shoes.
Yes. Well, and this speaks to what we were talking about before, in that it's a skill. And then over time, you'll need to be initially you need to be hyper vigilant and very conscious of that.
Yeah.
And then over time, it becomes a skill that becomes more subconscious. So you're not necessarily in that every single moment, but you are still paying more attention to these things.
Yeah.
I think it's worthwhile pointing out to people is that the more time you spend barefoot, the more the feet will toughen up, and there will be, to some degree, less risk from stepping on things. There's no doubt in my mind that initially the first time you try and walk down the street or go out in the bush barefoot is the time when you are at highest risk of getting something in your foot, for the two reasons that you're not used to it.
Like driving, yeah,
exactly. It's high risk early on because you're either not used to looking for what the dangers might be, and because the feet aren't conditioned to repel them. So after a long time barefoot, if I step on a thorn or something, I've got plenty of tough skin on the bottom of my foot.
Yeah, right.
To give me a good chance of repelling that. Like I get thorns in the bottom of my feet. It's very rare that they get through the hardest, like the leathery skin on the bottom.
Right.
In fact, I'd go so far as to say that the only thing that really concerns me these days in terms of foot injuries, like I'm mindful of glass, I won't step on glass, I won't step on thorns if I see them, but the only thing that really scares me is syringes.
Oh yeah, right.
And for me, I mentioned this this forest, Tui Forest, that I go out into. I have occasionally found syringes out there, and that's tough. Like if there's a syringe lying on the sidewalk as you walk past, you're probably going to see it, right? Like it's pretty visible, it's standing out. A syringe in the bush is rough because it can be hidden. It can be hidden in the leaf litter and stuff. So that's something that I'm always mindful of. I haven't stepped on a syringe.
Yeah,
but that's the one thing that leaves me concerned.
But that's why if people get out and pick up trash, we don't have that problem. That's why people say, aren't you worried about stepping on glass when you're outdoors? I go, no, because I picked most of it up. You know?
Yeah. And I do simple things. Like if I'm walking around the bush, I don't walk through deep leaf litter.
Yeah.
If I can avoid it.
Right.
Yeah. I walk on like gravel track or dirt track or on rocks and boulders and that sorts of thing because I can assess the risk of that. And I have the skill to assess the risk of that. No amount of walking in leaf litter is ever going to give me the skill to see what's hiding beneath the surface of it. So, yeah. Now, I'm really mindful of the fact, I am so much enjoying this conversation, but I'm mindful I need to get out of here really soon.
Yeah, I was thinking, we wanted to end like 15 minutes ago, but yeah. But
well,
cool.
You know, as much as I want to keep chatting, I have an appointment in 6 minutes' time, which I can't miss, unfortunately. So,
I know, guys,
we might need to. So let's say this.
Sweet.
Do you have any? Are there any things like briefly that you wanted to ask me that we haven't touched on that you want to touch on really quick?
Well, we could just do another episode sometime if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm happy. I'm totally happy with that. Just wanted to give you the chance.
One thing I'll throw in for folks while we're kind of in the context and the subject is like talking about getting used to things. You're going to find if you do this properly, don't like do anything like too fast or in a way that's not too smart. If you develop logically, it's good with your bare feet. I crave stepping on roots sometimes. These like sweet gum balls, they're, you know, maybe like the size of a pecan or a hazelnut or something, you know, like a big marble. I crave stepping on those sometimes. I don't avoid it. I want to because it massages the feet and feels so good. Or when you have shoes on, you can't dig your feet into the nice, cool or nice warm sand or the dirt or the grass. That feels so good, sometimes more than others, you know? And that mere pleasure in life, never mind the massage it's giving you, the working your fascia in the bottom of your feet, which has an effect on the tension of your whole body and the fascia all the way up to the top of your head. Never mind all that stuff. Just, you know, the basic and sheer enjoyment it gives you is like something we need as part of life, you know?
Yeah, I love it. And so as my parting comment, I'll leave people with something that I think ties into that in a way, which is this. If I go out and run, so both of these are barefoot examples, but this principle would also apply to having shoes on as well. If I go out and run, say, 5Ks on tarmac, or go out and run 5Ks on trail in the bush, I will be less stiff and sore from running in the bush. Now, I'm not saying the first time someone runs in the bush, they'll be less stiff and sore, but once you're conditioned to it, the variety and the nuance, and like you were saying, the stepping on all those interesting textures and the digging into it, and they're not just repeating the same flippers down on the ground every time, the body craves that variety, and I feel so much better for giving myself that variety than running rather than just pounding the pavement.
Yeah, amen. Same. But
cool.
So, any other last words, or is that it? Got to run?
No, No, I'm very good. I'm at 3 minutes to go now, so
Okay.
Thank you very much for having me on. I've really enjoyed the chat. The time's gone really quick. It's been really good.
Yeah, thanks, Jack, for talking. Glad, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. Jack talking from down under. But get outside, be smart about it, and enjoy. So hope you found that really valuable, folks. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to y'all soon. Bye.
Awesome. Have a good time, everyone.